Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, some injury updates, some pieces of news that are very interesting, including the Penguins' new head coach, plus we got some trade rumors involving Dallas, Anaheim, Florida, and a couple of other teams. We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. It really helps the channel. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. Don't forget to leave a comment. And don't forget to stay tuned for my June 27th, June 28th, and July 1st live streams talking about free agency and the draft. So very interesting note there, and definitely stay tuned for that. But in today's video, we got another news and rumor video to discuss. We're caught up on our signings, so we're going to look at all the signings that happened between June 3rd and June 4th. There were 7 signings over that time frame, so touching all of these signings from our past couple of days. So first, we saw Los Angeles Kings give a 1-year extension to RFA forward Martin Kromiak. Kromiak, who's a winger, played I think at the AHL level last year, gets a 1-year extension with AV of league minimum. Now Kromiak was a 5th round pick back in 2020, but looks like a really solid forward prospect for the Kings. I think in the next 2 to 3 years he could challenge like a bomb 6 roles, so it's not an overly bad contract. At league minimum, it's not that bad. So interesting note there, but Kromiak, who was a Kings draft pick just a few years ago, gets a 1-year extension and will remain in Los Angeles. Then we saw the Tampa Bay Lightning sign pending UFA forward Steven Santini. Santini, who's a right shot defenseman, this year played mostly at the AHL level for the Tampa Bay Lightning, had 1 game of NHL action, picking up no points. He gets a 2-year contract extension with the AAV of $775,000. Santini is a decent depth right shot defenseman. He's mostly an AHLer at this point in time, but can be called up and called upon if need be. So interesting sign there. I don't think this is too much of a bad contract. It's league minimum, so it's just some added depth there for Tampa on the defensive end. So just to note there. Then we saw the Edmonton Oilers sign one of their RFAs, one of the top prospects they have in their system. That's Robbie Harvinti. Harvinti, who was acquired from Ottawa last offseason, is a winger. He's 22 years old. He gets a 1-year contract extension with AV of league minimum. So interesting note there. Harvinti, I think, eventually could challenge for a bomb 6 role. I think he spent this past year over in the SHL, so very interesting note there. But Harvinti, who was a 2nd round pick back in 2020, has signed a 1-year extension with Edmonton. Then we saw the Detroit Red Wings give a 3-year ELC to one of their young forward prospects, and that's Jesse Kiskinen. Kiskinen, who's a right winger, gets a 3-year ELC with AV of $125,000. He was a 3rd round pick back in the 2023 draft by the Nashville Predators and was traded to Detroit last offseason in exchange for, I think it was D prospect Andrew Gibson. So Kiskinen does sign in Detroit. I think eventually he could be a decent 3rd line winger there for the Detroit Red Wings. So interesting note there, but Kiskinen has signed his ELC in Detroit. And then we saw 3 rather big extensions for players who are currently in the NHL. So first, the Canucks have signed UFA defenseman Derek Forbort, who's a left-shot defenseman. Forbort signed a 1-year deal last offseason to sign with the Canucks. Did really well. The Canucks really liked him, so they bring him back. He gets a 1-year contract extension with the AV of $2 million. Now, I think this is a very low-risk deal for the Canucks. Is it maybe a tiny bit too much for a 3rd pair, 6th, 7th defenseman? Yeah, maybe. Maybe it would have been easier if they had gone to the $1.5 million mark, but it's a 1-year deal. It's not an overly egregious overpayment, and I think Forbort has worked well with the Vancouver Canucks when he's been healthy. This past year, he got into 54 games of NHL action, putting up 2 goals and 11 points, so that's not overly bad. So very interesting note there, but Forbort, who's actually worked out quite well this past year on the Canucks blue line, has extended in Vancouver, so very interesting note there. Then we saw the Philadelphia Flyers give a multi-year extension out to one of their younger forwards, and that is Noah Cates. Cates, who's 26-year-old, he's a center/left winger, really solid bomb 6 guy, signs a 4-year contract extension in Philadelphia with the AAV of $4 million. That's a little bit of an overpayment in my opinion. I would have thought Cates would have gone like $3.5 million. He's a decent 4th liner. He can also play on the 3rd line, but he's not going to be like a top 6 guy. So very interesting note there. I think it's a tiny bit of an overpayment, but not too much. And I do think Cates is a solid forward in the Philadelphia Flyers organization. This past year, he had 16 goals and 37 points in 78 games for Philadelphia and looked really good. So I think it's a little bit of an overpayment, but the Flyers signed RFA forward Noah Cates to a 4-year extension for the the next 4 seasons. He'll be under contract in Philadelphia, so very interesting note there, although I do think it's a little bit of an overpayment. And then we saw one more signing, and it was a big one with one of the top free agents in this year's free agency class. And that is Colorado Avalanche forward Brock Nelson. Nelson, who was acquired at the trade deadline from the New York Islanders, has indeed extended in the Colorado Avalanche organization. He gets a 3-year contract extension with the AAV of $7.5 million. So I think this is about where he would have gotten on market value. Like, the center group in free agency is not the greatest this year. So guys like Bennett or Nelson, I think, could have easily been overpaid in free agency. I could have seen Nelson get between $7 and $8 million in free agency. I'm just a little bit surprised the Avalanche would give him a $7.5 million deal. It's only 3 years, so it's not a long-term bad deal. But Nelson is 33 years old, and on top of that, that basically eats up most of the Avalanche's free cap space they had this offseason. Now, Nelson is a solid second-line center, and the second-line center position is something the Avalanche have been desperately looking for over the past couple of years. Nelson this past year had 26 goals and 56 points in 80 games for the Colorado Avalanche New York Islanders, and was a very solid fit as a second-line center there in Colorado. So I can see how the Avalanche would sign him, and given the potentiality of what he could have gotten in free agency, I can see how they would have to sign him to a $7.5 million deal. I just think for the Avalanche in their current situation, it might be a little bit of an overpayment, but at least the Avalanche do have their second-line center going forward. So very interesting note there. So lots of interesting signings from our past couple of days, headlined by Derek Forbort in Vancouver, Cates in Philadelphia, and Nelson in Colorado. So definitely lots of interesting stuff there. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. We got a couple of interesting injury updates to talk about here, not too much. So for the Edmonton Oilers, Connor Brown, who missed the last 2 games of the Western Conference Final due to upper body injury, was able to play in Game 1 for the Edmonton Oilers over on Wednesday. So it's a really big boost there for the Oilers, as they were able to get Connor Brown back after he missed the last few games against Dallas. Well, Zach Hyman, who suffered a wrist injury that's going to keep him out for the rest of the postseason, is severe enough he may miss training camp in the start of next season due to it. So that could be a really bad blow. So for anyone who's thinking that maybe if the Stanley Cup Final were to go on long enough, Hyman could get back, that ain't going to happen. And on top of that, he may miss the start of next season due to it. So it's a horrible blow for the Oilers, as Hyman was a force in the playoffs and still a really solid point producer. So not only is it bad enough that the Oilers will lose him for the rest of the Stanley Cup Final, but it's also bad that he's going to be out potentially at the start of next season. So interesting note there. Well, for Nico Hischier, he suffered a lower body injury in the World Championships, missed the last 3 games of it, but he's already gone back to practicing, so Hischier's definitely going to be ready for training camp. So it's good to see Hischier's injury is not too severe and he's already back practicing. So very interesting note there. Those are the few injury updates over the past couple of days. We're good to see Connor Brown got back in the game action in the first game of the Cup Final. Bad news to see that Hyman may miss the start of next season, or at least training camp, for the Edmonton Oilers. And great news to see that Nico Hischier is back to practicing for the New Jersey Devils. So interesting note there. Next, going over to just a couple of pieces of news from around the NHL. So first, when it comes to players who are signing overseas, Rasmus Kupari, who this past year was a solid bottom 6 forward in the Winnipeg Jets organization, is a former Los Angeles Kings player, was acquired by the Jets in the Pierre-Luc Dubois deal a couple of years back, has officially signed in the National League. So Kupari is going overseas. Now the Jets will be able to retain his signing rights, but it does seem like Kupari is going to be signing overseas and won't be back at the NHL at least for the next season. So interesting note there. Devin Shore, who was a depth player at the Minnesota Wild this year, has also decided to sign overseas in the Czech League. So very interesting note there. Shore probably have gotten like a 1-year deal to be mostly an AHLer and a potential call-up option at the NHL level. So instead of that, he goes overseas. While Flames prospect Yegorov has signed back in the KHL. So Yegorov's a decent, I think it was goalie prospect or maybe a defenseman for the Calgary Flames, and he's heading back to the KHL for at least the time being. So very interesting note there. But Kupari, Shore, and Yegorov are all heading back overseas to play in leagues over in Europe. So very interesting note there. Going over to another award update we talked about in our last video, how Barkov won the Selke Trophy and he won the King Clancy Trophy. Well, there's been another award update, and it's with the Ted Lindsay Trophy. Now, we mentioned a couple of weeks ago that the Ted Lindsay finalists were Cale Makar, Nathan MacKinnon, and Nikita Kucherov. Well, the winner of the Ted Lindsay Award has been made official, and it is Nikita Kucherov. So Kucherov's going to win another piece of hardware. He won a couple of trophies last year. Of course, not the Stanley Cup, but he did win a couple of trophies. Now he's won another Ted Lindsay. So very interesting note there. I think it was McKinnon was second and Makar with third. I might be wrong on that, but those were the three finalists, the two Avalanche players and Kucherov does wind up winning it, so very interesting note there. But the Lindsay award has been announced, and it is Kucherov who gets it, so very interesting note there. When it comes to the Boston Bruins, it sounds like they're very close to hiring their new head coach. However, it has been made known that Joe Sacco, who was the interim head coach in Boston and did all right in the second half of the season for the Boston Bruins after being named interim after the Bruins fired David Montgomery, has officially been announced to not be brought back as the team's head coach. So it sounds like he'll probably get an assistant coaching job elsewhere in the NHL, not exactly sure where, but there's a couple of spots out there that could definitely use some assistant coaches, so it seems like Sacco will probably try and figure out where he could go and maybe get one of those assistant jobs, but he will not be back with the Boston Bruins as their head coach, so very interesting note there. Well, the Pittsburgh Penguins have hired their new head coach, and it's a little bit of a surprise. We've heard about guys like Mitch Love, DJ Smith, to some extent Jay Woodcroft, and there were a couple of other candidates who were being mentioned as potential new coaches for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Well, the guy who they did hire as their new head coach is a name that I don't think anyone was really expecting, and that is Dan Muse. Muse was an assistant coach in the New York Rangers organization as part of Peter Laviolette's staff. Muse has no head coaching experience at the NHL level, has been an assistant coach at some points in the NHL, but still, he has very limited coaching experience and no head coaching experience at the NHL level, so this is a little bit of a out of left park type move for Pittsburgh. I don't think very many people saw Muse being the new head coach in Pittsburgh, but he is going to be, so it's very interesting to note there that the Penguins are going with untested head coach at the NHL level, and it'll be interesting to see how Crosby and the Penguins wind up doing under Muse as the head coach, so very interesting to note there. But former New York Rangers assistant Dan Muse is now the new head coach in Pittsburgh. The last head coaching vacancy right now is Boston, potentially Dallas if they do fire Peter DeBoer, but very interesting to note there that at this point in time, Muse has been hired as the head coach in Pittsburgh. So very interesting news updates from the past couple of days as Kupari, Shore, and Yegorov sign overseas. Kucherov has won the Ted Lindsay. Pittsburgh has hired Muse as their new head coach, while Sacco will not be brought back as the head coach in Boston. So very interesting updates there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So when it comes to the trade rumors, we've got a couple of things to talk about here. We're going to start off with the Carolina Hurricanes. According to the fourthpierre.com, they were talking about the Hurricanes recently, and they mentioned that the Hurricanes are a team who is planning on potentially being very aggressive in free agency and the trade market this offseason. Sort of like maybe something like Nashville did last year, where they went out, they signed Marchment, they signed Stamkos, and they signed Shea. Now, did it really help them last year? Absolutely not, but they were very big spenders in free agency, and it might be that the Carolina Hurricanes take that same sort of approach this offseason. They're about to have about $30 million in cap space, so they have a ton of cap to play with. They're going to lose a couple of guys on the defensive end, like a Orlov, like a Brent Burns. They're also potentially losing a couple of top 9 forwards as well, so they are going to be losing a couple of guys, and they're definitely going to have to replace them. But there's a very likely option out there that the Carolina Hurricanes are going to make some major changes and try and add some big time players. So it's going to be interesting out there. We've heard them potentially be linked to a guy like Mitch Marner. I would not be one bit surprised if they try to go after Nikolai Ehlers, Brock Besser, maybe some of the bigger defensive players like a Ekblad or a Provorov. So it'll be very interesting out there. But the Canes have a lot of money to play with some of their expiring contracts, and they are going to be a team who is going to be extremely interesting to watch out for in free agency and in the trade market, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to Dallas Stars, we have two things to talk about first when it comes to Dallas Stars. According to David Pagnotta, Mason Marchment is a potential player that the Dallas Stars could be trying to shop to try and free up some cap space. You know, the Stars are not in the best cap situation. They want to try and make some moves, and they don't really have the cap space to do so. So Marchment's making, I think, $4.5 million for, I think, next year and the year after. So I think he's got 2 years left on his deal, and he's been a really solid middle 6'4". Like, is he worth the $4.5 million cap hit? I'm not exactly sure. It might be a tiny bit of an overpayment, but he's been a really solid middle 6 forward. So I could see teams who could definitely use some more middle 6 help definitely try and acquire Marchment, and I definitely think that Dallas could get something in return for him. So we're going to have to keep your eye on that. But David Pagnotta does say that Mason Marchment's a name we have to watch out for when it comes to Dallas potentially trying to alleviate some of their cap problems. When it comes to Aaron Ekblad, Jeff Marek wonders, just speculating once again, no official rumors suggesting this, but Marek was speculating that the Dallas Stars may try and go after a guy like Aaron Ekblad in free agency. Now, of course, it only makes sense if they have enough cap space to do so, because Ekblad is one of the top free agents in free agency and will very likely be a name who is going to be targeted in free agency. But it makes sense. Like, we know the Dallas Stars right side of their blue line is not overly good. You got Ilya Bushkin, you got Matt Dumba, you got Cody Ceci. Like, that's not right side of a defense that's going to win you very much cups. So I can definitely see where they would have a ton of interest in trying to acquire a guy like Aaron Ekblad to maybe partner up with a guy like Miro Heiskanen on their second pair or their top pair. I just don't know if they have the cap space to do so. I can definitely see the fit. I definitely see where Marek's head is at, but I don't know if they have enough cap space to do so. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on the Dallas Stars, as if they are able to create enough cap flexibility, they may be a really solid landing spot for Aaron Ekblad for agency, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to the Philadelphia Flyers, according to Elliotte Friedman, I think it was on one of his radio hits he was doing, he says that Nick Hague is being linked to the Philadelphia Flyers. Apparently, according to Elliotte Friedman, the Flyers are a team who has some major interest in Nick Hague, and I don't think it's too much of a surprise. No, the Flyers, they're still trying to go through a retool or a rebuild, whatever you want to call it, and they could definitely be trying to add some more pieces this offseason. They have a lot of draft picks to do so, and Hague makes a lot of sense for them. Like, they don't have too much size on their blue line. Like Sanheim, York, they're more smaller type defensemen. Like, most of the players on the Flyers blue line are on the smaller side. Hague is a bigger frame. I think it worked great as a second pair left shot defenseman on that Flyers team, and I think Hague could be a really solid add. Like, the Flyers had the cap space to pay him the $3 and $4 million he would want in his next contract, and the Flyers also have the picks and prospects that the Knights might want in the trade for Nick Hague. I don't think the Knights are going to want players back for Nick Hague. I think they're going to want picks and prospects, because they're probably going to want to go out and try and get one of the top free agents, and they just want to try and alleviate some of their cap problems by trading Nick Hague. And Philadelphia, like I said, makes a ton of sense, especially given the fact Hague's a younger type player, and their team is trying to add some more younger pieces. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. I can see the fit between Philadelphia and Nick Hague. I can see the reason why the Flyers might be a really solid landing spot, and I can see them try and pull off a deal with the picks and prospects they have. So I'll have to wait and see on that, but according to Elliotte Friedman, Philadelphia has some interest in Nick Hague. Next, going over to Utah, according to David Pagnotta, the fourthpeer.com, he was talking about Utah, mentions that the 4th overall pick is definitely on the trade block for the Utah Mammoths. Now, I mentioned this in my mock draft video. I said that Utah would trade the 4th overall pick for Raquel. I know a lot of you guys didn't really like that trade, but definitely sounds like Utah would be open to moving the 4th overall pick for the right deal. According to Pagnotta, he says that they want a proven top 6 younger type forward, someone who can grow with the team, who's already established at the NHL level, who they could definitely use at this point in time. Like, whoever they take a 4th overall is probably going to be a year or two away from contending for a roster spot at the NHL level, whereas if they trade the 4th overall pick, they can maybe get someone who can help them now, because we know that Utah is definitely going to be a team who wants to make the playoffs next season. So I can definitely say they want the 4th overall pick on the block. If that right deal never comes along, then I can definitely see Utah just use the 4th overall pick. But if there's an offer out there where they can get a young top 6 proven NHL forward that could bolster that forward group, I could definitely see Utah wind up going after it. I don't know if that's a guy like John Jason Peterka in Buffalo, Jason Robertson in Dallas. Like, there's probably a couple of other young guys who could maybe be mentioned as some sort of top level guy who would make some sense. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Utah, especially leading towards the draft, as there's a potentiality they could trade the 4th overall pick. So I'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to the Dallas Stars again, according to Jeff Marek, but I've also seen this mentioned a couple of other places. Jason Robertson's a name that's picking up some steam in the rumor mill. Now, according to a couple of reports, Robertson might be available. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee, and I don't think anyone has at this point, but there's been rumblings that Robertson may be available for trade, and that Dallas may want to try and get some cap space and some picks back in exchange for some roster flexibility by moving Robertson. Now, I've seen from a lot of Dallas Stars fans and agree with them, Robertson's a really good goal scorer. You don't trade talent like that. He's entering the final year of his deal. He'll be a UFA next year. I can see if they have some issues when it comes to the extension of a contract, why they would potentially consider a Jason Robertson move, but you don't trade guys like that. Like, I personally do not see Jason Robertson being moved, but there has been a couple of people out there who said that maybe Robertson is on the block and could be half of the right price, which to me is definitely surprising, but it definitely seems like that. And Marek was talking about this on, I think it was Daily Faceoff, and he says that two teams he thinks could be very good landing spots will be Ottawa and Anaheim. So I don't think either of these teams are going to do it without an extension in place. Like Ottawa, over the past couple of years, they acquired Chychrun, they acquired DeBrincat. Those two deals never worked out for them because those guys never had long-term extensions in place, and you're risking losing him as UFA and giving up a lot of assets. So unless there's an extension in place, I don't see Ottawa doing it. For Anaheim, even if there wasn't an extension in place, I could see him do it. I think it's more likely that they would do it if there was an extension in place. But Dallas is a team who I think is going to go for it this year, just like Utah. I think they're going to make some bold and big moves this offseason. Robertson will make some sense. And this Ducks team has a lot of picks and a lot of prospects that could offer the Dallas Stars. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. Personally, I do not see Jason Robertson going anywhere. I think it's a lot more likely that he'll extend and stay in Dallas than he gets moved. But if he is available, there would be a ton of teams who would have some major interest. The Stars could get some roster flexibility as well as a lot of draft capital or prospects back, and it'll be a very interesting concept to see. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Jason Robertson as a potential trade target from the Dallas Stars. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But that's what I'm going to talk for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you see Jason Robertson getting moved? Does Utah move the 4th overall pick? Could Philadelphia try and acquire Nick Hague? Does Dallas move Mason Marchment and try and acquire Aaron Ekblad for agency? And could the Canes be very aggressive this offseason trying to sign some top UFAs? Definitely have your thoughts on all of that. Plus the news updates, including Pittsburgh's head coaching updates, the injury updates, and the signings from the past couple of days. Definitely have your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and for that to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this with all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. Don't forget to leave a comment. Don't forget to stay tuned for my June 27th, June 28th, and July 1st live streams. I also have a blog to my news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. If you want to add that in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.